This podcast is sponsored by Gemography. If you're struggling to find top developers in a competitive market, Gemography connects you with the top-tier remote developers from untapped regions, all pre-vetted and interview-ready. And the best part? They handle recruitment, payroll, admin service, equipment, office space, healthcare, and benefits in full local compliance. You'll know all costs upfront, no surprises. Don't let big players hoard the talent. Start hiring world-class developers remotely at gemography.com/hire. That's GEMOGRAPHY.com/hire.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Broadcasting from around the world, you're listening to The First 100, a podcast on how founders acquired their first 100 paying customers. Here's your host, Hadi Radwan.
Good to have you on the show, Sterling. How are you doing today?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm very excited about this episode because I have so many questions on how to become a better sales leader. And you've done it in the past with Divvy. Sterling Snow today is our guest who has helped Divvy reach 380 million in funding and billions of dollars in valuation. And currently you're a venture partner at Pelion Venture Partners, which is an early stage venture capital that is helping entrepreneurs grow their business. Sterling, how did you end up in sales, not in finance or strategy or engineering?
Yeah, when I was going to school, I went to school for finance. And when I got into one of my first companies, which was Jive, I just gravitated towards where the growth was happening in the business. And there's nothing that grows quite like the revenue teams, everything from marketing to sales and all that good stuff. And so it really was just sort of a natural pull to where I felt like the action was happening. And it's a little bit like a sport where you kind of get addicted to playing the game every month, every quarter, every year. And it's very tangible to get that dopamine hit when you hit your number and some of those kinds of things. So yeah, that's how I ended up on the sales side of the house.
Amazing. And early on in maybe childhood days, were you someone who was very introvert or more extrovert and happy to engage and, get your ideas out there?
It's a good question. I would count myself, even from when I was a kid, as somebody who was relatively extroverted, but it also takes a lot of energy for me. Some people recharge when they're speaking with other people, meeting new people, doing those kinds of things. I'm not that way, but I do enjoy a fair amount of extroverted activity. So I don't know. I'm probably somewhere in the middle.
Amazing. Is there any techniques that you've used in the past that, made you very confident in approaching people maybe in early days and then later leads? And how did you overcome rejections? Because rejections come naturally when you're trying to get people to buy something from you. Maybe 1 out of 10 would say yes, but the other 9 have rejected you, and it has this emotional connection. When someone gets rejected, they either give up or they have the motivation to try again. Is there any frameworks or tactics that you've used to help bolster your sales career?
No frameworks necessarily, but I think the thing that matters the most is if you understand why you're doing what you're doing, if you can tie it back to sort of a broader mission and vision, then it's easy to not get discouraged by the 9 that don't work, and it's really easy to get excited by the 1 that does. So I think when people face rejection, you have to understand why you're putting yourself through that, why you're subjecting yourself to that situation. That's my big thing is, why are you doing it? Do you believe in what you're pitching, what you're selling? Because it's all the same, right? Raising money, selling a product, networking. It's just everything's very similar. So you have to understand why you're doing what you're doing, and then the rejections are a lot easier to get past.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing this. The show is about the first 100 paying customers. That's why we call it the first 100. When you started with Divvy, what were early strategies that you've deployed so that you bring that sales velocity up? Is there anything that wasn't scalable, but you had to do it early on?
Sure, there's tons of things, right? But for me, the focus always ends up being on the levers that you can control in big ways. And so I think a lot about the inbound marketing side of the house and how do you increase top of funnel activity? Because if you can solve for that, there's really no problems you can't solve. So I'm always a fan of starting there.
If we look at the top of the funnel strategies that you deployed early on, what were things that, started to fill that upper layer bucket of the funnel?
I think the great marketers have a way to almost invent their own channels. So you think about things like content ads in newsletters, you think about trade show strategies, but I think the key thing, if you're actually going to have outsized results, is figuring out a new muscle that hasn't been deployed. Everybody can spend money on Google and LinkedIn and Facebook. Those aren't proprietary channels, but when you can have something proprietary that you've invented, you can really get outsized return, especially on your investment in top of funnel activity.
Is there any anecdotes or stories from your early days at Divvy that you could share with us that can highlight this?
Sure. So here's the fun story. This is before we'd really raised any money or anything. And there was a big tech trade show that was happening in Utah. It's called Tech Summit. And we couldn't really afford to buy a booth and do a sponsorship and all that stuff. So what we did is we had one of our employees get dressed in a purple suit with a purple cowboy hat. We taped $2 bills all over the suit and all over the hat. And we called him the Cashback Cowboy. And he just walked around the trade show, like giving people, these $2 bills off of his suit and telling them what Divvy did and how we could get them more cash back. So you think about those quick hit hack kind of ways to drum up demand for yourself in unique ways.
That's a beautiful story. And I think it doesn't just, pent up demand, it also exposes the brand, because now you have that virality in terms of the story of the tech show, right? There's someone who has done something different than just coming and presenting. So this is amazing guerrilla marketing tactics. If you had today the 10x the budget that you had back then, where would you have invested it?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think there's lots of things that could have done more with better investing. And I would probably say channel partnerships, channel relationships, things that don't necessarily pay off in the short term, but tend to really change trajectory when you look 5+ years out.
That's interesting. Is there any channel in mind that you could share with us that you've missed in the past that you could have doubled down on?
I wish we would have done a better job in the accounting and bookkeeping channels at Divvy with the product that we had and with our go-to-market motion. That's something that I definitely could have done a better job of.
Amazing. You talked about, being both a marketer and a salesperson. There's always that dance between these two departments. If you're starting today, you're a first-time founder, what should you prioritize? Hiring a marketing team first or a sales team?
Well, I'm a big believer that you shouldn't have them be separate departments, that you should create a revenue department and have marketing, sales, implementation, customer success, customer support all under the revenue roof. And I believe that that's the way that modern CROs are going to function. But to answer your question specifically, I think that you have to work on your method for generating demand. That's the first thing that you have to work on. Because if you don't have demand, it doesn't matter how good salespeople are. Salespeople are there to convert demand, not necessarily generate it. So I definitely want to fix marketing problems before I fix sales problems. That's how I think about the funnel.
Makes a lot of sense. And I think once you define it this way, it doesn't bring those two buckets separately, because demand generation can come from marketing and then conversion would come from sales. So if they're in the same department, they're essentially generating the top line. And if you were to think about it today, if you were to create an ideal organization chart, so you're the startup founder, you're coming in, you maybe raised your seed round or your Series A, How would you define those roles? Where do you start your hiring spree? How does the organization chart look under the revenue leader?
Yeah, so I always start with people who can, within marketing, who can build pipeline. So they build pipeline through demand gen. So you're talking about campaign specialists, performance marketers is kind of your first couple of hires there. And then you're moving down the funnel, and this is like AEs, account executives. And you're going to add sort of your first people to create pipeline, your first people to convert pipeline, and then your first people to implement it. And you work from the top of the funnel on down. And once you've got that whole vertical structure, then you can start going horizontal and getting into more things.
Makes sense. There's so many startup founders that are listening to this podcast, and when you're starting, there's two schools. There's one school that says you're, as the founder, you need to lead sales. You need to go out and sell maybe the first 10 accounts, 15, 20, 30 accounts. And then maybe when you prove product market fit, you have a couple of millions in your bank, you need to get a sales leader or a CRO. Then there's another school that says, focus on your strengths. So if you're a technical co-founder, focus on your strengths and then get a sales leader. If we were to take this hypothetical case where I'm a founder of a B2B enterprise software, I want to sell my software, walk us through your sales playbook if you're doing a founder-led sales strategy. What will you do on day 1, 90, 180, and then 365? And how would you define success, each one of these milestones? I know it's a long question.
I do think that initially startup founders have to be very involved in sales. And the reason for that is less about sales. It's more about hearing the feedback that the market has about your product. And if you outsource those conversations with prospects and customers too early, you won't be able to build the right type of product that actually is going to be able to scale and fix the market need. So I agree with that, but I also think that once you've found product market fit, you need to focus on scaling other parts of the business. And so you can't hang on to it too long. That's how I think about the first part of the question. What was the second part you asked there?
So if you were to build that sales playbook by day 1, day 90, day 180, 365, and then how would you measure success at each level? Day 1, what does success mean to you? Day 365, what does success mean to you?
I think it's all relative. It's about what your goals are. But I think, to me, success is designated by working towards building an enduring business. And so that can be revenue targets, that can be free cash flow targets, that can be product milestones. And really, it's just very situational depending on what you're trying to build.
Makes a lot of sense. If I'm today a founder starting from scratch and I'm going to go with a founder-led sales strategy, and I don't have connections, right? So I'm going with the cold approach, which is cold emailing, cold calling. What advice do you have for me?
I don't know that there's too much innovation here, but what I would say is focus on changing your message, because you want to see what resonates. You want to see what gets people to respond and take a phone call, listen to a demo. So don't get so focused in just shipping outreach, sending emails, making calls, that you forget to iterate on the actual message that you're trying to use to get people in the door.
Makes sense. And how would I, figure out if my message is working? Is it just the number of open rate, or do you think there are tools that I could use that could help me in that domain?
I'd just be paying attention to, open rates, response rates, click-through rates. I'd just be looking for engagement. And if it's getting ignored, it's not working. And so that's how I think about that.
You've shifted today to become a venture partner at Pelion Venture Partners. What triggered that shift?
So Pelion had been on our board. Our board member is a guy named Ben Lambert. He led our Series A, had been on our board the whole time. And so we were people who we knew very well, we liked, we trusted. And we'd operated Jive, sold Jive, we'd operated Divvy, sold Divvy, and it just felt like the right fit at the right time, and time to learn a new industry and develop a new muscle, and that's how that came to be.
What excites you the most today about entrepreneurs? What are you looking for in people, in industry trends?
It's really all about the founders. Are they thinking big? Do they have a hard problem? Do they have a unique insight that's going to allow them to create massive businesses? And so the thing that gets me the most excited is the quality of the founder. Everything else is secondary to that.
Amazing. What is a principle that you live by that has helped you become who you are today?
Yeah, interesting question. I think the one that comes to me the most often is that people who are able to choose to do hard things end up having an easy life, and people who choose to do easy things end up having a hard life. And I think that's a state of mind that's helped me a lot.
This is a great principle. Is there any anecdotes or stories that you could share with us in terms of that principle?
I mean, take the decision to choose to go into startups, right? There's certainly easier, less stressful career paths, but if you can gut through those and have some grit, you end up with a much more impressive, in my opinion, set of skills and experiences that allow you to take on the world and make life a little bit easier. You also put yourself in a position to have outsized financial outcomes, which makes your life easier. And so that's an example that's probably relevant.
What are you currently obsessed with that others rarely talk about?
Oh, man. Right now, I'm obsessed with the fact that you have to do multiple things well. I'm specifically thinking about startups. We came from the last 10 years where people were like, you could grow really fast, but you didn't have to be efficient. And today we're talking a lot about efficiencies. But what I think we really have to do in startup land today is you have to be efficient and you have to grow really fast. You don't get to pick between those things, especially if you're a venture-backed tech company. So I think a lot about false dichotomies, and I talk a lot about false dichotomies everywhere in our life, but there's an example of one in startup.
Do you feel that revenue and profitability they should work together, they should grow together, but in the startup world, they seem to, at the beginning, move apart. So you focus on top line, you spend so much marketing dollars, sales dollars, you make a lot of mistakes, profitability goes down, and then the expectation is you get more funding as long as your unit economics make sense. You get more funding, and that gap might increase, might decrease. We've seen it in a lot of companies. We've seen it in big companies like Uber, where they've raised millions and millions of dollars. The gap went up. Now it's going down after maybe 10, 12 years. Do you feel that this type of obsession is something that you can manage from day one, or it's difficult to be efficient and effective at the same time when you're starting?
Well, the truth is there's no right answer. The Uber playbook, where they raised billions and billions and burned very, very aggressively, and then, kind of flipped to eventual profitability. I tend to think that it's very situational. It depends on the cost of money. Money was very cheap for a very long time. There's no right answer. There are very smart reasons why you should increase your burn and grow quickly, but the muscle that we're seeing today in the best startups are a lot more around increasing revenue and profitability much earlier on in the cycle than we've seen in the past 10 years.
Amazing. What's the best advice you ever received, and what's the best advice you have ever given?
Best advice I ever received, probably to never allow yourself to be a victim. It doesn't matter the situation that you find yourself in, you have to take ownership of it and never allow yourself to be a victim of it. And it's probably among the best advice I ever got. And then the best advice I ever gave, that's interesting. I give a lot of advice. I wish I followed half of it. I would say for people who are early on in their career, the best advice I give is to find someone who has the same trajectory that they want to emulate. So if you've seen somebody become a leader very fast or gain technical skills very fast or whatever it is, you want to put yourself in situations that can replicate the goals and the vision that you have for yourself. And so think about the people and their trajectory and their journey first and foremost when you're making early career decisions is something that I think has been helpful to some folks.
Thank you for sharing this. This was very helpful. One last question. What's next for you?
Well, right now I'm enjoying the venture capital world. And so I'm looking forward to investing in and working with the best founders at one of the best firms in the state and in the country. So excited to find and fund the next great businesses.
Amazing. And if early founders or people who wish to go into entrepreneurship are listening to this, what type of investments are you looking to do? What's your appetite?
So we do seed and Series A primarily. We have a focus on B2B technology, but we do a fair amount of B2C and D2C and some other stuff like that. But the sweet spot would be B2B, seed, and Series A companies.
Excellent. We'll put that in the show notes. Sterling, thank you for being part of our show. This was an amazing and insightful episode. Is there anything you'd like to share with our audience?
No, I think the conversation was great, and thanks for having me on. It was a blast.
Amazing. Is there a way we can reach you if we're listening to this? LinkedIn, email, anything that you'd like us to put in the show notes?
Yeah, LinkedIn and Twitter are probably the easiest places to find me.
Thank you, Sterling. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you so much for listening to the First 100. We hope it inspired you in your journey. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe to our podcast on Apple iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or Spotify, and share it with a friend starting their entrepreneurship journey. Leave us a 5-star review. Your support will help spread our podcast to more viewers.